All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We always like to dig into some pretty interesting stuff, but this one's really cool, I think. We're going to be looking at, how kids learn these big, important life lessons, and specifically the influence of fathers.
Yeah, it's an area I find fascinating, that dynamic in families.
Yeah,
It's not that one parent is more important or, that's definitely not the message here. But the material we've got today, it really focuses on specific things that fathers, tend to bring to the table as kids grow up. And yeah, I'm excited to dig into this.
yeah, and I think it's cool because it sort of goes against a lot of these, I don't know, traditional, like gender stereotypes and things like that.
For sure. And I think one of the most exciting aspects of this is that it can give us a much more nuanced understanding of family dynamics and how they work.
Absolutely.
So think of this as a deep dive into a very specific part of a very complex system.
Yeah, and our goal is really to sort of understand those lessons, right? Like, where do those come from? How do they end up sticking with kids?
Right, exactly. And what impact do they have,
Hmm.
on how kids develop. And
Yeah.
and in the end, it's really about hopefully providing some valuable insights for anybody who's listening. Whether you're a parent or thinking about family or maybe even just curious about what shapes us, you know, as people.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people think about.
Yeah, it's a very universal theme.
Okay, so let's jump right in. This first area that our material really focuses on is this idea of risk-taking and resilience. And you see this a lot with dads,
Mhm.
encouraging their kids to sort of push their boundaries a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like, climbing a little bit higher on the playground or, taking off the training wheels a little earlier than maybe mom would be comfortable with. Or it's about that expectation that you get up after you fall and you try again. What's the impact of that kind of encouragement?
Well, what's fascinating is that this encouragement, especially when it comes from a father figure who also provides this sense of safety and security,
Yeah.
it can really help a child develop their sense of self-efficacy, which is basically that belief that they can handle things, that they can succeed. It goes beyond just saying, go for it.
Yeah.
It's often conveyed with a confidence that the child, I think, picks up on.
Hmm.
It creates that you've got this mentality.
It's almost like, yeah, like they're getting permission to be brave.
Exactly. And then, of course, they're going to stumble. Everybody does. But the reaction to that,
Hmm.
that shake it off, you got this attitude, it changes how they see failure. It's not this big, scary thing, just a little bump in the road.
Yeah, so it's not about preventing them from failing.
No.
It's about teaching them that, like, hey, you're going to fail sometimes.
Yeah.
That's part of life.
Absolutely. And
That's
that's
right.
where that resilience comes in.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not just about, physical toughness, like getting back up after you fall off your bike.
Yeah, it's deeper than that.
It's about that mental toughness too.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, this early exposure to challenges, to pushing their limits, and then having that father figure there saying, "You got this."
It's huge.
It has such a lasting impact on how they deal with challenges throughout their lives.
Yeah.
It makes them more willing to step outside their comfort zone. They know that even if things go wrong, they'll figure it out. They'll recover. They'll learn.
Right. And so it's that kind of permission to explore, to try things,
Exactly.
knowing that like, hey, I've been through stuff before.
Yeah,
I can get through it again.
absolutely.
So another key lesson that really stood out in our materials is problem solving and critical thinking.
Right.
And this is something that dads often approach in a very specific way, it seems like. Maybe through tinkering with things, like in the garage, or just encouraging their kids to be more independent, to figure things out for themselves.
Yeah, and what I find really interesting here is the emphasis on understanding how things work. Not just what they do, but the why behind the what.
Mm.
So it's not just about giving them the answer. It's about helping them develop that process of thinking things through.
Yeah, like the classic example of a kid comes to dad with a broken toy. And instead of dad just fixing it for them,
Right.
he sort of sits down with them and helps them figure out, okay, well, what's broken? How do we fix it? What are the tools we need?
Exactly. It's about guiding them through that process of discovery. And that can have a huge impact on how they learn. It makes them curious. It makes them want to try things, to experiment, to not be afraid to make mistakes.
Right? Because I think a lot of times kids are afraid to make mistakes because they're afraid of being judged or ridiculed.
Yeah.
And it's almost like that permission to say like, hey, it's okay to mess up. It's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah. That's a really powerful message. And when it comes from a father figure who, often represents that kind of strength and authority,
Yeah.
it can really give kids the confidence to try things without that fear of failure holding them back.
Right. So it's almost like, yeah, it's about building that resilience again.
Absolutely. And that resilience is so important, not just for, dealing with setbacks, but also for learning and growing. Because if you're afraid to make mistakes, you're never going to try anything new. You're never going to push yourself outside your comfort zone.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's move on to something that can sometimes be seen in a lot of different ways, and that is tough love and discipline.
Hmm.
The sources we look at definitely point to fathers often playing a specific role in setting those firm boundaries and instilling a sense of responsibility. How does that play out?
Well, I think it's important to understand that effective parenting isn't always about being, soft and cuddly. Sometimes it's about setting those clear expectations and having consequences when those expectations aren't met.
Yeah.
And the research suggests that fathers often contribute to a child's development by doing just that, providing a framework,
Hmm.
setting those rules, teaching accountability, and helping kids understand that their actions have consequences.
Right, and it's often those everyday things, isn't it? Like
Right?
cleaning up after yourself, finishing your homework before you go out to play. It's
Absolutely.
simple things, but they teach these really important lessons about responsibility.
Exactly. Those seemingly small lessons, they build up over time.
Hmm.
And they play a huge role in shaping a child into a responsible adult, someone who understands rules, someone who respects other people, someone who takes responsibility for their own actions.
Yeah, and it's interesting because sometimes those lessons can be tough,
Of course.
but they're so important in the long run.
Absolutely. I think it's all about finding that balance,
Right.
between being supportive and loving, but also firm and consistent.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of parents struggle with. It's like finding that sweet spot where you're not being too lenient,
Yeah.
but you're also not being, a drill sergeant.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance for sure.
Now, this next area is really interesting because it challenges some of those old ideas about fathers and emotions.
Yeah.
The sources we've looked at, they make it clear that it's a mistake to think of fathers as being unemotional.
Right.
It's not that they don't have feelings. It's just that they often express them differently or maybe they teach about emotions in a different way.
Yeah, and I think what's insightful here is that, we all express emotions differently.
Yeah.
And fathers often model and teach ways of navigating emotions constructively,
Right.
not by suppressing them, but by understanding them and learning how to deal with them in a healthy way.
So it's not about pretending you don't feel something.
Yeah.
It's about, being able to acknowledge it and process it and move on.
Exactly. And that's such a valuable skill, being able to be resilient in the face of adversity,
Yeah.
to manage those tough feelings without being overwhelmed by them. And that's something that fathers often demonstrate very well.
Yeah, because they're often in situations where they have to be strong.
Yeah.
Whether it's at work or dealing with a family crisis.
Yeah.
And they kind of model that ability to stay calm under pressure.
Absolutely. And that can be so helpful for kids to see because it shows them that, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be stoic all the time.
Mm.
But you do have to be able to manage your emotions in a way that allows you to function, to be effective, to be there for the people who need you.
And the sources also suggest that fathers often show this balance too, right? Like
Sure.
knowing when to be strong
Hmm.
and when it's okay to be more open and vulnerable.
Exactly. And that's such an important lesson for kids to learn because it shows them that, strength isn't about hiding your emotions.
Mhm.
It's about being able to express them in a healthy way.
Yeah, because I think for a long time there was this idea that like men shouldn't cry or, they shouldn't show weakness,
Right, right. And I think we're starting to move away from that now.
thankfully,
Yeah.
because it's not healthy.
No, it's not. And it's not realistic either because everyone have emotions. Everyone experiences sadness and grief and fear. And it's important to be able to acknowledge those emotions and deal with them in a healthy way.
Yeah. Okay, so finally, let's talk about this classic lesson that often gets associated with father figures,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the importance of hard work and perseverance.
Yeah.
And our material really emphasizes this. Like, fathers often lead by example in this area.
Absolutely. Children observe their father's dedication to their work, their commitment to tasks, and their ability to push through difficulties.
Yeah.
And that provides a really powerful example.
Right, because it's not just about talking the talk,
No,
it's about walking the walk.
exactly.
And kids see that. They see their dad working hard, they see him, overcoming challenges, and they learn from that.
Yeah, they absorb those lessons even when they don't realize it.
Yeah.
And it shapes their own understanding of what it takes to succeed in life.
And who hasn't heard those classic dad voices?
Oh, yeah, the famous dad wisdom.
Like nothing worth having comes easy.
Yeah.
Or if you want it, you have to work for it.
Right, right. Those little nuggets of wisdom.
Yeah, and they might sound simple, but they really stick with you.
They do. And they're often accompanied by those actions, those real life examples of hard work and perseverance.
Yeah, because it's one thing to say it,
Yeah.
but it's another thing to actually live it.
Absolutely. And that's what makes it so impactful for kids. They see that it's not just words, it's a way of life.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, we've looked at these 5 really important areas where fathers often have this really unique impact.
Yeah.
Fostering that willingness to take risks and build resilience, cultivating those problem-solving skills and that critical thinking, instilling that importance of discipline and responsibility, teaching about emotional strength and control, and demonstrating the value of hard work and perseverance.
And it's worth repeating that while we've been focusing on these specific contributions from fathers,
Yeah,
it's not about saying that mothers or other caregivers aren't important.
absolutely not.
Every parent brings their own unique strengths to the table. But these fatherly lessons, they offer a distinct and lasting influence that really complements all those other aspects of a child's upbringing.
Yeah, and it's really thought-provoking, isn't it? Like, when you think about your own life, the lessons you've learned,
Mm-hmm.
whether they were explicitly taught to you or just things that you picked up by observing the people around you, it makes you realize how powerful those early family dynamics are.
It really does. Those early experiences shape so much of who we become.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good place to leave it for today.
Yeah.
I hope everyone listening has found this deep dive as interesting as we have.
Me too. It's been a great conversation.
And maybe it's giving you some things to think about, some new perspectives on those fatherly lessons that we all carry with us.
Yeah, maybe it's even sparked some ideas for how to approach these things in your own families.
Absolutely. So until next time, thanks for listening.
Take care.